Our PhD student, Umlelo Dlomo. Right. All of you have a little write-up on Pumi. Pumi is a registered chartered marketer with MASA, the Marketing Association of South Africa. Right. He has over 20 years experience in strategic marketing and business communication, as well as experience in the tourism area. He's currently employed as a Chief Marketing Officer at the Road Accident Fund. Pumi also serves on the International Association of Business Communicators, as well as the Marketing Association of South African Boards. Pumi will speak to us on his PhD topic, which is the influence of reputation management in creating a sustainable competitive advantage for small and medium enterprises, with particular reference to the tourism industry in Gauteng.
If you don't mind me, I'd just like to sit over here so that I can just make reference to some notes that I had made here. Unfortunately, my iPad died, and so I can't make reference to that. I'm sure everyone can hear me perfectly fine.
Well,
okay.
We always have to engage our shadows.
Apologies for that.
It will be a shadow.
I always smile when people look behind them as if they're going to say, what's
I was fascinated, Ben, by the introduction, because when you talk about finishing or not finishing, I'm thinking, phew, as a PhD student, maybe there's a memo that was sent out there that you're going to be giving us all honoris causa. So we don't have to finish our studies. But also, the important thing is that whenever you engage in a PhD and you make a choice to do that, one of the first things that happen to you is, when am I going to finish? And most of the times then you forget the journey and how pleasurable actually it is to go through the entire process. That is where then the stop-start sometimes happens. But just like anything else, you also have challenges in the sense that your study ages. The more you procrastinate, the more you don't finish, then it becomes an old study, and the literature is no longer then relevant, etc., etc. Now you have to go back and refresh things. And that is why we try by all means to make sure that we finish. I took approximately 18 months in my study, which I know was a push, but all I did was to work each and every single day. I still am even now, because obviously the final thing hasn't been submitted, but it was important for me that I finish. So the opportunity that I've just been given is essentially to just share with you my presentation, which I also shared with Prof. In essence, like I was advised, it is a discussion, and I will treat it as such, and you are able to sort of ask me a question or two as we proceed with the presentation. It's a very, very short presentation, but I'll try and give in as much as I can. So, obviously, just like any other research, there has to be a motivation. I have spent a lot of time in the tourism industry. And one of the things, and then I created some kind of a different interest where I looked at, how can people be sustainable in terms of their businesses, which are smaller businesses, and then looking other side on reputation management. I mean, obviously, working for the organization that I work for as a chief marketing officer, you'd understand why reputation is important there. So then I looked at these two constructs, and I said, there are small, medium enterprises that are out there. Do they understand what reputation management is? Because the challenge is that more often than not, if you are running a business, because you are the owner, that everything you do finances, you do this, so you are an all-rounder, whereas reputation is influenced by many other things. And if you look at the bigger corporates, there's a model that is called the 7 reputational drivers that was developed a long time ago. And then on top of that model, there's a doctor in Stellenbosch who then took that particular model. It brings back to the thing of reinventing what's already been there. Took that model, and then she then said there are 8 reputational drivers. But all these are relevant to big corporates, and they're never relevant to small, medium enterprises. What's going to happen next week, Wednesday? There's elections. What is one thing that all political parties are saying they're going to deliver on? And as we're all sitting here, where are those jobs going to come from?
Not from them.
Who's going to do it? Do you know also that the stats that came out that says the corporate environment hasn't employed in over 5 years? Over 5 years or more, I can't remember the exact figure. So, and also government has reached its full capacity. There's about 1.3 million people that are employed by government. It cannot employ anymore. So if we are to create jobs, where are those jobs going to come from? It is individual people, it is small, medium enterprises, it is ideas that are constantly going to be generated and people are going to go out there. But it is all lip service because government tells us how important the SMEs are, and we also get to learn a lot about their contribution as it is currently. I can give you statistics, and this is basically what I've been writing about for the past. Oh, actually, because also in my master's degree, I also wrote specifically about that. In terms of what is it that, how important this industry is. So based on that, I became then curious to say, everybody says these are the different types of things that we can give these people in order for them to survive and contribute fully into the economy. But what about the softer aspects of survival? Who is looking into that? Hence, I chose and looked specifically at reputation management. Obviously, it's an academic paper. You have to then look at different things and how they interact. And I particularly chose sustainable competitive advantage, and then also looking at, obviously, business performance at the end, which I can share with you when I show you my model. Now, the topic that I then chose was the influence of reputation management in creating a sustainable competitive advantage for small, medium enterprises. And somebody may ask, why do I not say small, medium, micro enterprises? And that is dealt with in the study, because these, as you know, PhD or any other study, you do make choices. So the choices from a definition point of view is a choice that I made where micro was completely eliminated. These are then operating within the tourism industry in Gauteng. Also, I needed to limit it because obviously I can study the whole country and it will take me forever and I'll end up not finishing. And then, so based on that, then the research problem question is that does reputation management have an influence in creating an SCA for SMEs in Gauteng, in the tourism industry in Gauteng? So obviously this was done drawing into different models, and then I've already spoken to you about reputation management from the 7 drivers of reputation, which is the existing model, and I don't know of any other model that is in existence. The assumptions were that, obviously the SMEs, they value sustainability and they will do anything to obtain it. And I've already indicated that one of the things that all SMEs are talking about, and you will see also it comes out in the study, which was fascinating, is that they're very much about performance, this and that and that. The more you start talking about the softer aspects of the business, then they get completely confused. But when I then read the reviews afterwards in terms of general comments that we're providing after the study, they were saying, I have learned so much as I go through your questionnaire, or the guys were talking to me in terms of, I shouldn't also think that business performance will be driven primarily by all the work that I put in there. There are other things that could be utilized in terms of that. And also the understanding and the importance of reputation management varies. So we're saying not everyone has an understanding of that, so that's an assumption. And then finally, I'm saying one of the assumptions is that reputation management helps us to achieve the sustainable competitive advantage. The justification, I've already said there's a lot of information that is out there that justifies why small medium enterprises are important and critical. But also there is particularly an author in 2014, Patoki, and I can't pronounce the other surname, that there is a lot of research on reputation management and the use thereof within bigger corporations, because they understand this as a very important and a critical tool that assists organization to win and actually gain a sustainable competitive advantage in the market. Finally, they use that to fight competition, because every time when you say, for instance, let's compare Gibbs to Da Vinci, people then start saying, what is their reputation and whatever, and it's a whole lot of other things that they look at. Also in tertiary institutions, that actually happens a lot, where research has been done in tertiary institutions where people compare and say, who has a greater reputation, then based on that, a choice to be made that I will consume your product. So I'm doing exactly the same thing, but this was never in existence for small, medium enterprises. CEDA, as an example, in 2017, they reported that about 55 to 65% of the economy of South Africa is contributed to a 9.1 million in 2017. That is the contribution that is done by the SMEs. Now, if they are this important, why isn't there somebody focusing on them and making sure that they're looking after them and taking care of their needs, and also designing tools to make sure that they're able to sustain themselves and they survive in order to contribute fully in terms of what they needed to do? I'm not going to take you through my empirical objectives. There are quite a lot, but as you would know, the empirical objectives then would determine what your hypothesis is. I had a very, very long hypothesis, I think about 15 things that I needed to check out, and the results are quite interesting, because out of the 15, I've got 3 categories from those 15 in terms of what is positive, moderately positive, and only 1 negative that came out at the end. The theoretical framework, I used first of all the GAPS model of service quality. Some people may say this is a very, very old model, and why would I choose such a model? But the reason why I selected this particular model was because of its relevance to the tourism industry, because it actually defines what service is. The tourism industry is essentially about service. It is making sure that you have that form of interaction with customers, and that is what distinguishes you from one customer to another. Now, I then chose other models because I thought, okay, I've got the gap service model, and then I realized that it's going to limit my study. So I then said, from a theoretical framework perspective, let me also review the resource-based view theory. I did the theory of organizational identity dynamics, stakeholder view theory, value proposition theory, as well as Porter's 5 forces of industry analysis. You can't talk sustainable competitive advantage, obviously, without talking Porter. So I then had to bring this in, and you will see as you go through the study why this particular one was important. Now, these theories were then explored. When I explored them, I did 2 things. I got as much information as possible, obviously starting from back then when they were created, and then brought them forward and look at different views that are currently in existence. And then I said, what are the other critics that are there that are criticizing this theory? But I put it out there without necessarily saying, this is what I'm going to be saying that is contrary to them, because that wasn't at the point where my study was supposed to be. But it was important that I put it out there, because you can't just make use of a theory without necessarily saying what are other people. And then I motivated why then the choice of these theories would do, and what are they going to do in the study. Then I moved on into my empirical review. That therefore constructs, if you look at these theories that I've already put out there, there are constructs that come out of these theories, and I've taken entrepreneurship, service quality, resources and capabilities, organizational identity, stakeholder management, value proposition, reputation management, SCA, as well as business performance. Based on that, then I developed the model. So it's a 3-tier model. So there is a predictor variable, there's a mediator variable, which is a sustainable competitive advantage, and there's an outcome variable, which is then the business performance. What they all did, as I said, I have managed to create an hypothesis with about 15 constructs that have to be proven in the entire study. The ontology is a realist, basically, where I state that the facts are facts as they are, therefore, but there will also be a need to dig deeper. The epistemological perspective, which is the lens of this research, is positivism. Now, I need to get quicker to, I don't know how much time I have, but without wasting a lot of time, maybe 5 minutes. Yeah, let me get into the research design and methodology. This was a pure quantitative study. Like I say, in all the studies, and especially at this level, you may make a choice in terms of what you wanted to do. But I wanted to try and see if I can reach as many people as possible, because this industry is growing and I needed to get a diverse view. Also because my model was quite extensive. In order for me to be able to analyze the data the way I wanted to do it, it needed to have a slightly bigger sample. The survey population and sample frame, we had a database of over 500 tourism SME in Gauteng. Now, this was a complete nightmare for me because we received the database. I don't know if you know the 3 tier of tourism. There will be regional tourism, there will be municipal tourism, there will be city tourism, there will be provincial, then there will be national. Now, in order to be able to get a database is a complete nightmare. No one keeps a proper database of this. So we then looked at Gauteng and said, okay, let's get to Gauteng tourism, etc., etc. Got the database from there. Then we had to try and see and clean it up. And then we ended up with very little because either those numbers had already, the businesses were already not there, and etc., etc. So we had to create our own database by literally just going on Google and then using some of the names that we had, and also going and zooming into a particular area and saying who is there operating a tourism business, and then we'll be able to then contact them, and then we created our own database. So that was basically a nightmare. But I'm saying also one of the things that through this study we have done is we have a clean and current database, which we wouldn't have had previously had this not happened. So we then chose a sample frame of 315 SMEs within this, because those were that we were able to get into. I mean, Palant already says 100 is okay, so I think 315 is not bad. And then the sampling method was the non-probability convenience sampling, which obviously we would find out who is available and able to talk to us at that particular point in time, and then we'll be able to talk to them provided they were willing to do that. I then designed a structured questionnaire. You must remember I have those 7 constructs that I created, which would be entrepreneurship, all the way value proposition, sustainable company, etc., etc. Each and every single one of those contracts, there were questions that were related to that, and people were then asked to rate on a scale of 1 to 5. And then so you'd find that I would possibly have about 4 to 5 questions under each construct, which they then had to rate. We also used something that I've never seen it being used before, but it was called Survey to Go application. Basically, it is a gadget that you take and then you attach it to your mobile phone. So we had a mobile phone and then this gadget, and then the researcher would go into the field. So the Survey to Go application would then just plug into that, and then the questionnaire just automatically appears there, and you're able to rate the questionnaire there and then. It then converts itself and then it reads back into the database at the office, so that you don't carry a large sum of questionnaires. So the other thing that also was nice about this is that in cases where then these guys were not willing to or maybe we'll go to a certain area there's no signal, then we're able to get our own we had questionnaires that went there. So I had 15 questions in total, and we were rating on a scale. So the data collection started obviously with a briefing, which was quite extensive, getting to understand this gadget, and then I only just did 6 pilot interviews to check the length of the questionnaire, what was, some of the concepts were quite confusing. If we were to translate them into either vernacular, what would be the way in which we could do it, and then and also just testing this technology, because it is something that is quite new, and we just wanted to find out if it will work the way it's supposed to work, and it reads and then reports back instantaneously at the server. So the analysis, because obviously it's quantitative, one would expect that it would be ESS, it would be Excel, then you do ESS, and then I just did EFA, t-test, correlation, as well as ANOVA, which were just ways of testing this. And then the presentation was done obviously in graphs, pie charts, tables, and descriptions. And then there was a whole thing of integrity and ethics, which we took care of by making sure that the database was trusted, the training of the field workers, and then the records of all this information is kept. And the data cleaning process also happened, because once we've received everything else, we had to clean it and make sure all questions were answered. I fought with some people to get my ethical clearance certificate as quickly as possible. So we did that because I needed to do this during festive season, where these guys were actually at their establishments because it is their busy time. And then also basically just getting people to consent to the survey and saying this is what you want to do, and if uncomfortable, then you pull off. Validity and reliability was taken care of, making use of the pilot study. The experts to test the questionnaire, my supervisor was there, and also the research company that assisted me as well, they looked at it. And then we also asked the statistician to look at it vis-a-vis what the hypothesis is, and then see if we will be able to answer the questions that needed to be answered there, and then basically looking at my hypothesis and the questions whether it would be able to answer there. So obviously there's a lot of literature that went into this, and then we now have preliminary results. As I've indicated, they are divided into 3 parts. That's where then the model was then designed. This model, in essence, it says if you want to do something instantaneously to make sure that you use reputation management as a small medium enterprise to get business performance, obviously obtain sustainable competitive advantage and business performance, this is what the typical model you do. If you want a more long-term type model, this is what the construct that you focus on. But then there's one way through the hypothesis it proved that there is no correlation between these two constructs, which is sustainable competitive advantage and business, and there was one. And there are reasons for that which actually have come up during this study. That's basically a summary of my study. It has we did the similarity index a couple of days ago, which was the results came back, and then now we need to proceed and then do the technical editing and do the final submission. Unfortunately, my supervisors couldn't be here because he has a family situation, Dr. Norman Chilia, but it's been a wonderful journey, and I'm thinking, will I do this again? I think maybe yes.
Okay. Yeah, boy, yes. Yeah. Which of those reputation drivers had the greater influence on sustainability and those kinds?
The main one is organizational identity as well as reputation management.
What is that?
Organizational identity and reputation management. Let me explain a bit why. The views of small medium enterprises are completely different from how we view constructs and things that you would think this is how things would work. As an example, the small medium enterprises are saying to themselves, this is my business. Even if I do hire people, they are not going to be responsible for anything except to take my orders and instructions. I am the person who's going to be then responsible for each and every single thing. So there's no sense of responsibility and a sense of giving information to or delegation, which then has created a lot of problems because they get bogged down with a lot of things. And they say this in the afterwards, because even though this wasn't a qualitative study, we then spoke to these guys afterwards and said, just tell us about the experience as you were going through. What is it that you found? So that's when they started coming up with this type of things. I've learned so much and whatever. So organizational identity, because it is so highly reliant on them, they believe that they are the it. And then reputational management. They understand reputational management within their own right, but they believe they are the only ones responsible for it. So I should behave in a particular way in order to have a good reputation. So those two are the strongest one in terms of the hypothesis.
You just alluded to something. I just want to latch onto something. Sorry, Mala. You said that you had a conversation after. So, in my view, is that this is part of the study. So it should be a mixed method because you did what is known as sequential mixed method.
Yeah.
Because you had an open conversation and you kind of captured those observations. So I would think perhaps you should go and revisit that because you're sharing the information that was gathered as part of the research process. So I think my advice would be try and capture that.
It would be something that I would want to capture, but you must remember this was a very unstructured conversation. And so it would then mean that the methodology should have been adjusted initially to make sure that you structure it as well.
Could have gone back.
Yeah.
So what is the problem with that?
Yeah.
Well, I do want to report on empirical evidence, and that is structured because the study is designed that way. It is designed such
So
that
it's almost if you say, forgive me, I am strictly positivist.
yeah. No. Perhaps
You don't have to be apologetic, but
perhaps that is what I'm saying. I just want to state what it is.
But in semi-structured, I'm saying in semi-structured
It's
interviews,
acceptable, yeah.
it's totally acceptable to use data that you've gathered, especially if you position it as such. So you would obviously then not say that you use structured interviews, and you'd have to shift your positivistic views a little bit, because you could speak to the fact that you use semi-structured interviews to gain an in-depth understanding that your empirical data and your quantitative methodology is how you could ground it, because you are doing, I'm saying you are coming from a positivistic perspective. But you could say that you gained thick descriptions, in-depth understanding from your respondents, this being quantitative, and that's how you actually decided to utilize some of that.
So in a way, I want to interrupt you for a minute. You can continue that. It's not that it's wrong. But I think what I want you to hear, I almost want to tease you with a question. Do you want this to be a super project, or do you want this to be a thesis?
I want this to be both. Let me tell you why.
So you want it to be both.
Because this is not the type of academic paper that you're gonna go and shelve it at Da Vinci's library. It consists of practical steps and information that anyone who wants to make sure that they want to improve their reputation as an SME, they can make use of. They do not have to have a superb understanding of academia.
But do I need to do a thesis to get that?
Well, yes, sometimes you have to, because sometimes you must remember that in the academic world, the structured and stuff that, which not necessarily obvious, would only be respected by virtue of the fact that it was done in this particular manner. But how do we ensure that all our things that we do, either as academics or whatever, you are able to take that type of information, make it and send it out there to people so that they can make use as practical tools in order to improve their lives. Other than that, we're just going to live in an academic bubble forever. Now, the reason why I'm saying it is both is because I personally, looking at what I want to do going forward in my life and the contribution that this could make, this, starting from the academic rigorousness and then practicalizing it, will then be what I need as a tool to make sure that I'm able to work.
And I give you credit for all of that. I want to be critical about something.
Okay.
As much as you say you work realist and positivist and quantitative, which is fine, you had a preconceived idea. There's a relationship between two things.
Yes.
And then when you went to your choice of choosing a theoretical or conceptual model, you chose a theoretical model. And you use that theoretical model as your direction.
Yes.
So I wonder if you shouldn't be considering whether your real title has got more to do with the critical review of a specific framework, as opposed to the construct.
Okay.
Because I'm curious to know, what are you contributing to the construct?
Okay.
Or are you contributing to the usage and the relevance of an existing theory?
No. There's no existing theory in the format that I've created, as
But
I've
you use the
indicated.
existing
Constructs.
measurements.
Yes, the constructs are in existence. Now I'm saying a combination of these constructs. No one has looked at how using them combined would then assist in attaining a sustainable competitive advantage and eventually business performance.
But you've got predefined parameters.
Yes.
That's what I want to get.
Yeah.
So because you've got that, I think you must be more bold in acknowledging it.
Okay.
Because you didn't go into this idea with this mind.
Mm.
You said, I take on a frame
Yeah.
and I'm going to put that, I'm going to look through that lens
Yes.
to this reality.
That's correct.
And I think you must just articulate.
Yes.
Maybe you have.
It is at the study. There's a whole section that talks about why would you choose these constructs. Then I talk about, in my review of literature that speaks about reputation management, sustainable competitive advantage and whatever, this is what I found previously. Secondly, there is practically models that are there in existence that do not necessarily speak to any of these constructs. Now, I do then explain why were they then selected, because the question would come, why would you choose this? Why didn't you choose culture, as an example? But then, a question like that would be like, in organizational identity, culture is already covered in there. And I do state then how it relates as a much bigger construct. So based on that, that whole section is there that motivates why I have made the choices that I've made. Because other than it would make sense, because I would just wake up and choose all these 7 constructs, not even back them by theory, and then say, voila. No, that's not what it is.
Tell me, what would have been the difference if you choose the conceptual framework as opposed to theoretical framework?
I think I did both. Did I not?
So what's your conceptual framework?
Sorry. The conceptual framework is when I make use of those theories, which was the GAPS model. No, there's a theoretical framework.
Yeah, that's theoretical.
Yeah.
So conceptual framework is a framework that's not discipline specific.
No, it looked at entrepreneurship. It looked at then it became those constructs that were then selected from the theories themselves.
Okay. All right. You mentioned validity and reliability, especially when you do quantitative studies, and considering you had a sample of 300.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you kind of tested for reliability and validity in the pilot study.
Mm.
That's a little dangerous because the reliability cannot be determined in the pilot study. You've got to administer specific tests in terms of, especially considering the large sample size you had.
Mm.
And the instrument you used was a validated instrument, but you had
Yes.
to activate for SMEs.
Yes.
So the moment you tamper the instrument, you've got to revalidate it.
Absolutely.
So you got to do Cronbach alphas,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course you said you did exploratory factor analysis.
Yeah.
So that would have determined your validity.
Absolutely.
So I think your write-up, you did it, but I didn't write it up properly. So that's the scientific kind of support for
quantitative. Yeah, we did that. Obviously, like I say, it is a 400-page document, and then I could not I articulate everything else. And also I learned a lot from a statistical point of view. I'm not a statistician, but what I sat down and then we went through this, then that's where I got to understand, how do you then go about doing this. I was very, very concerned that in all that we're trying to do, we must actually, as the theory states, have a margin of error that is below 10%. So that is what then we've managed to achieve. I think mine was 5.7%, which we then managed to and then that's when we actually used Cronbach to basically try from a validity point of view. But the other analysis that we did,
Reliability.
we then did reliability, etc., etc.
Okay. And what was your final contribution? Was it a model or a framework?
Okay.
Because you had a conceptual model,
Yeah.
which you drew from the theory or
Yes.
theoretical framework, and you tested for certain relationships, and then you obviously had to drop out some relationship which you proposed.
Yes.
So eventually, what you have made a contribution in terms of?
The contribution comes in 3 ways. I don't know.
So you have a framework.
I have a model.
Do you have a model?
Yes,
Have
I have
you
a
tested
model.
it?
Yes, it is a model that is obviously we took the hypothesis, we looked at then what is more positive. That's why I said it's a 3-tier model.
Yeah, but I want to make sure you use the model Because you work with existing
Yes.
stuff. Have you created a new model which
Yeah.
you have tested?
No, this one hasn't been tested
So
as
it's
a
a
listed.
framework.
Yes, it will be a framework, but then, which is why I'm saying I am proposing that exactly the same for further studies be taken, then to be further tested in
To
the
become
market.
a
model once it's been used in the field.
I think
Which
it's
is-
critical that
yeah.
you're therefore a framework
Yeah,
that you propose to be tested to become a
we
model.
got a model. Yeah.
It's just a technical jargon, but don't
Yeah.
get trapped that you've got a model
Oh, yeah.
and then it's not a model.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. You have a question?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think mine just come from an outsider as a participant to some of the questionnaires that I normally get. So the question is, in which language or what language did you use or structure your questionnaires? Because most of the time, if you look at the audience or target market SMEs, could be your mama there, tourism, and you find that the Queen's language is not so clear to them.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you bring a questionnaire in, I get to just answer because the questionnaire and I have a choice between 1 and 5, but I don't exactly know what I'm answering to. So if it's only in English, then you find that at the end the answers you get is not a true reflection of actually what I thought I'd be answering.
Okay, that's actually a very good question, and you always burn yourself obviously with the questionnaire because you come up with this academic, big English type of concepts and whatever. A simple thing like stakeholder management, some of these SMEs didn't understand. This is why we did the pilot, and then also did extensive training. We started identifying those concepts and constructs that seemed quite complex and complicated, and then based on that we were like, how do we then simplify these without necessarily translating the entire questionnaire? We then also realized that you can't just send these out. Because we're losing this new technology, the researcher must actually be there to be able to then vocalize it and be able to either translate it there and then on the spot in Sisutu, in whatever. So we'd go into one area, say on a Saturday, we know we've got about 10, 15 appointments there. We go and finish that off, and then it would be also another area. So we had to make sure that we do that because, like I say, a simple concept that when I sit around and ask everybody and say stakeholder management, you know what other people say is that guy with a stake and managing everybody. But it's a concept like that was just something that it was uncomprehendable. So we did then do that in order to try and make sure that it was also because we want to make sure that you get the right type of information. Interestingly enough, when you also test certain things, because as you now get the data and then you start writing and then you say, let me go back and then compare and see if it makes sense. And then you would be able to pick up certain things, and unfortunately that not a lot of those were picked up. The other thing that I'd like to tell you is these small medium enterprises are actually quite educated, and then you must go back and think about why. If you look at when their businesses were started, most of them were around the 2010 and after that, etc. So it's relatively young people who've gone out there and actually established these businesses. And then you look at, the level of education, number one. Number two, when the business was started, how long have you been in operational for? Look at those three together. And then you realize, actually, this is a young person. And then because also it shows the ages between the ages of what and what, there's so many of these guys, which is between the ages of 35 to 40, actually. That's where the bulk of these guys were. So they are relatively educated. In fact, most of them have matric and others have post-matric. So even though some of the concept may have been foreign, but there was a basic understanding and they were able to grasp it. So that we had to make sure that happens.
Okay. All right then, Pumi, thank you very much. Just take care of the road accident fund.
We will. It is my job because.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.